Episode 2 of Mobile Suit Gundam GQUUUUUX, titled The White Gundam, isn't just a continuation, it's a deliberate step backward to push things forward. Where the premiere introduced us to new faces, a flipped universal century, and a reimagined world order, this second episode pauses to reflect. It peels back the layers of this alternate history and lets us see the shift, not just be told about it. And make no mistake, this is a nostalgia-heavy episode, but in the best way. But it's also more than that. Episode 2 does what some of the strongest entries in Gundam's long history do. It revisits legacy without simply repeating it. It reframes moments we know and remembers the weight behind them. The execution isn't perfect, and we'll get into what's missing. But what it offers is a confident, reverent piece of storytelling that gives the show a stronger foundation than expected for only its second outing. The episode opens in the thick of the 1-year war. Only here, things are different. The sound design hits first. We hear the old school explosions, the Federation radio chatter, and that slightly teeny beam saber sound effect that any longtime Gundam fan will recognize in seconds. It's also jarring in how deliberately retro this whole episode feels. But then it's layered over a modern visual treatment. This blend of old and new is the core theme of the episode. What we're watching isn't a recap, it's a rewrite. In this timeline, Char didn't simply chase Amuro around in a red Zaku. He won. He captured RX-78-2 Gundam early in the war, claimed it for Zeon, and turned the tide of history. That detail alone reframes nearly everything we see in the first half of this episode. The Gundam, iconic as a symbol of the Earth Federation's last stand, is now a Zeon weapon. It's painted red, rebranded as a tool of occupation, and piloted by Char himself. The moment he emerges from the smoke in that suit, the music swells into a haunting orchestral callback. It's also a direct reversal of the original series' iconic hero arrivals beats. This isn't triumph, it's conquest, and it lands visually and emotionally. There's no getting around it. This is Char's episode. While the focus is technically spread out across several key players, including Shalia Bull and a few unnamed Zeon officers, Char commands the screen every time he appears. This version of him is cool, composed, and for lack of a better word, finished. He's not the haunted man from Zeta Gundam or the ideological firebrand of Char's counterattack. Here, he's precise, methodical, and terrifyingly in control. The dialogue is efficient. He doesn't monologue, he doesn't choose scenery, but everything about his presence, especially how others react to him, tells the story. Officers defer instinctually. Shalia Bull, introduced as his equal in theory, is clearly operating under his shadow. The way Char interacts with the Gundam itself feels personal, but not sentimental. It's a weapon to him, a symbol of victory. That subtle shift in how the Gundam is framed from hope to dominance is one of those powerful undercurrents running through this episode. Episode 1 of Gundam GQUUUUUX hinted at the alternate timeline with narrative and exposition. Episode 2 commits to it fully. The big divergent point is clear now. Char capturing the Gundam during Operation V. From that moment on, the Federation's tide-turning tool becomes a liability, and Zeon begins consolidating control over Earth and its colonies much faster. What's particularly effective is how the episode doesn't over-explain any of this. It trusts the audience to connect the dots. If you've seen the original series or even Origin, you'll recognize these reworked events for what they are. But even if you haven't, the narrative still functions. There's enough context to tell you that something's off. That history was supposed to go one way and didn't. We have to talk about how good this episode looks. There's a real respect here for the original character designs from the original Gundam, but they've been updated with subtle touches, slightly more angular lines, a tighter palette, and expressive lighting that brings them into a modern space without losing their identity. The mobile suits are rendered with crisp line work and tactile detail, especially in close-ups, and those close-ups matter, because this episode isn't just about movement, it's about presence. The animation is more restrained than episode 1, but it suits the tone. Most of the episode is dialogue heavy and reflective, but when the White Gundam enters the battle, it feels earned. The animators clearly understand the visual weight this machine carries. Its beam saber ignition is treated like a horror reveal, sudden, loud, and final. Sound design is just as impressive. In a move that will absolutely delight longtime fans, the original 1979 audio library is woven throughout the episode. The classic Zaku machine gun effect, the internal cockpit hum, even the old transmission static. They've been cleaned up and layered with new ambient effects, but they're still recognizable, and it's a masterful way to bridge generations without relying on nostalgia as a crutch. And the music, easily one of the highlights again. The orchestral score evokes the tension and scale of Gundam's best entries while sprinkling in the original series motifs. During Char's first sortie with the Gundam, the soundtrack dips into a slower, darker remix of Tobe Gundam that's subtle enough to draw attention, but once you notice it, you can't unhear it. It's very clever. Alright, let's talk about one of the criticisms most people are probably going to have with this episode. This version of Episode 2 doesn't include everything seen in Gundam GQUUUUUX The Beginning, the limited theatrical prologue film that released earlier this year. The biggest omission is the expanded Battle of Solomon flashback. In the film, this sequence showed a desperate Federation counterattack and a very brief but striking appearance from Celia Mass, which added a strong emotional layer for fans who knew her relationship to Char. In the episode version, these are trimmed down or cut out completely. But if you didn't see the movie, this really doesn't affect much. The pacing remains tight, the core themes are all present, but those who saw the film or were hoping to see these expanded scenes again, the omissions are noticeable. There's been speculation that some of these story beats may return later in flashbacks or side material, which wouldn't be surprising, but I feel it's still worth noting for anyone who expected a one-to-one adaptation from the film. And to the episode's credit, the trimming down doesn't actually hurt the flow of the episode. It remains focused and cohesive, and in some ways more impactful because of it. There's less spectacle, but more emotional weight. Episode 2 of Gundam GQUUUUUX is a slow burn. It's quieter than the premiere, less flashy, and more introspective. But that's exactly what makes it work. It takes the time to show us how this world diverged from what we know, and why that matters. There's a reverence here for the original series, for its characters, and for the era it came from. But there's also a willingness to reshape that legacy. This isn't a nostalgic trip for the sake of it being nostalgia. It's part of a larger thesis. What if the symbol of hope, the Gundam itself, was turned into a symbol of conquest? What if Char didn't lose? Those are bold questions, and while we don't have the full answers yet, this episode shows GQUUUUUX is serious about exploring them. It isn't trying to replace the classics, it's trying to speak to them, to challenge them, to imagine a different path forward. And so far, it's doing that with care, confidence, and a little bit of style. If you've made it this far, please do me a huge favor, hit that like button, leave a comment, let me know what your favorite part of this episode was, and if you're so inclined, go ahead and subscribe. We're going to have plenty of more discussions about Gundam GQUUUUUX as the series goes on. And of course, you'll see plenty of Gundam stuff throughout the year.